A brew? What's up, buddy? Come here. Yeah, buddy. Oh, hugs. Brew hugs.
Wow, that's really loud.
Test, 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 1, 2, test, 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 test.
How's that sound?
Test, 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 test. Good. Test, test.
All right. And I think the house is pretty quiet now.
It's a couple birds.
It's the third mic that's giving the room, it's making everything else much more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I started watching Lucifer recently because I kind of ran out of stuff to watch on Netflix. I found myself watching like gun-based ultraviolence and like, you know. Oh, I know, Bruce. Hold on, I'm telling you a story though. So I'm watching these like movies where people are basically just running around shooting each other up, and there's some analyst on the other end of a phone giving him directions and, you know, crafting, you know, alleyway deals to get the data, no matter what. And, you know, it doesn't have nearly a lot of these movies don't, or these stories lack the finesse of James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all brute force. It's like watching construction. You know, I know they know what they're doing, and the story resolves, and, you know, there's a crafty plan, and I can appreciate the quality of the plan, and it might actually be more realistic than James Bond. But it's all so mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't anything about the story. Even the characters, they were all just sociopaths. And so I'm left there thinking like, I'm not even sure if this story is even worth like finishing.
Right.
I finished it because
Well, I think this gets back to one of the problems with Netflix that they're running into is content bloat. Once you have access to a bunch of different action adventure films and you put them next to each other and you're looking at all of them next to each other, you realize they're mostly generic and very few things stand out, and then the things that start to stand out in the action adventure usually has to do with the storyline or something to do. So then it becomes an issue of when you really want an action adventure film to give you what you need, you're looking for narrative. Because if you don't have the narrative,
actually matters.
right? If you don't have the narrative to make the story matter, then the action sequences are just mechanical. You might as well just be looking up choreography.
You know, that was the other thing about it. It was all gun kata. There was only one. No, that's not true. There were two notable fight scenes where one character demonstrated a chokehold and a throw and a pin, and then two guys jumped on both of them and separated them, and they were all on the same side. And then the next fight scene was, like, you know, knives and hand-to-hand combat, and then of course one of the combatants decides that they've had enough, and he just pulls a gun and shoots the guy.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, we kind of knew that this was going to happen because they established earlier that this character, the guy that shot the other one, was not to be trusted.
Well, and what's really crazy about the fight scenes and choreography in general is the way that we've been conditioned to expect fight scenes to play out. We want gun trade back and forth. If there's weapons, we want trade back and forth. If there's hand-to-hand, we want trade back and forth. There has to be some sort of back and forth element for it to be interesting. And whether it's like in reality, those things wouldn't be back and forth.
Yeah.
Even and this is something even down to sport fighting is different from real fighting in the sense that because of the rule sets and the things that you're not allowed to do, a fight lasting 25 minutes in an octagon, that's not realistic anymore.
No.
It's so far from realistic now because of the rules that people who actually practice are able to discern that. But you have people who are casual observers now who think that fighting is what you see in mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that's a sport.
When I was younger, I watched a Shotokan tournament, and I can only describe Shotokan as basically the Jeopardy of martial arts. It's like who can press that button fastest,
Right.
because a lot of those strikes, those attacks were basically killing strikes, and it's who's faster. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that's kind of the way it really is.
Well, when you bring in blades, absolutely. There's
Yeah.
no back and forth. Like,
Well, yeah.
if you...
Well,
when we're talking
Shotokan's
about
a sword technique.
Right,
martial
that's what I'm
art,
saying.
so-
when you were, like, maybe fencing, there's a little back and forth.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about the reason that the samurai trained the way they did for the single strike is because you only really get one strike.
Oh, yeah.
And if your opponent strikes first, you lose.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of the idea, if you can deflect, yeah, that means you're a really badass swordsman. But in reality, the person who strikes first is going to have the element of surprise, so you don't know the angle of attack. And if they have good timing, it's going to be really hard to deflect. So it's a matter of who strikes first, who gets in the range first, who strikes first. That's the way a lot of those arts are and the way that they're taught. So what we're seeing in terms of the back and forth in movies is just not even...
There's one movie, The Hunted, with Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones, and it's actually very similar to First Blood, the story, the origin story of First Blood, and where it's about a special forces guy who doesn't adjust back to society and kind of loses it, and they have to send his instructor to find him because he's the only guy who can actually find him. And then they also weave in this whole special forces knife technique, montage flashback sequence where they show him mastering these knife techniques really quickly, and the way they show the application of these techniques, it reminded me of Shotokan in that sense that if this movie was even close to an accurate portrayal of special forces knife technique, and then it's not a protracted let's duke it out with Krav Maga and big boots. It's it's siphon filter. It's ninjas basically killing people really quickly.
I mean, Krav Maga's not drowned out at all.
I know it shouldn't be, but in movies we see these exaggerated Krav techniques running these gauntlets of moves that's if they were landing these things, these guys would be flattened out.
Yeah.
Because those boots are big, and Krav is a really aggressive style of combat.
Yeah, if it's actual Krav, it's definitely not drawn out, which is why I'm again, this gets back to the movies representing these back and forth protracted exchanges where that's not how things actually work in real life, because part of it again is if you have two people who are exceptional practitioners, then they may get to a point where they have back and forth trade on potentially guarding strikes and deflecting them. But as soon as one person lands, it's gonna be pretty much over. It's not gonna be, oh, one person lands 35 strikes and the other person lands 62 or something. That the things that happen in sports fighting are not what happens in real
Yeah.
fighting. It's just not the same.
Oh yeah, no,
When you have
like
when you
Kate,
have no
Kate.
rules and there's no holds barred,
Um,
that again, and you're actually using all your force. That's when people, that's when somebody gets punched and they hit their head on the concrete and they die.
yeah.
Again, it's not
Or that's when that big person lands that leg strike and bye bye bone,
right.
because these guys are bruisers who can really kick
Yeah.
hard, and they're not pussyfooting around, and they might just be really playing a strong defense because they don't want to get hurt themselves, because they know that person they're fighting with can also deal a pretty tough blow.
Right.
Now, I think I've seen a string of videos lately that are all, like local street fight type stuff, or bare knuckle brawl in a warehouse type things, where it's just a couple of guys duking it out, and some other compatriots are like standing around like pretending to enforce some kind of regulation or officiation of the proceedings, and there's a lot of, I don't know. It's really strange that we have this kind of glorification of this fighting culture. I feel like it's almost like a waste, in a lot of ways at low levels, because at best somebody gets hurt,
Right.
and they never do that again. Whereas if they'd have just gone to a gym and trained and done it under, little better conditions, they might have learned something and been able to be safe about it and not, experience concussion from the street,
Right,
instead of just getting like choked out.
Yeah.
And I think and it's weird because I feel like there are a lot of unreasonable expectations about what fights are. I've seen fights in front of bars that were over like as fast as somebody said the wrong word, and then it was done, because
Yeah.
not everyone is a trained martial artist.
Right. I mean, most quote unquote fights are not.
Martial artists.
Yeah, and even in that, it's not an exchange. It's
Yeah.
somebody getting beat up
Yeah.
most of the time, and that's
Yeah.
kind of where, again, like what people have in their heads, because of movies and also because of the UFC. Well, not just UFC, but because of mixed martial arts and how it's evolved based on incorporating a lot of the rules and judging from boxing, has really distorted people's ideas of how fights are supposed to be. And this is one of the reasons I think the Captain America choreography was really good. A lot of this stuff was one hit, one and done. In the context of, if you have one person who's especially skilled versus other, like, say 6 or 7 people who are not especially skilled, yes, you can get somebody who can take them down. And I think that's where a lot of people don't believe it, because it's misrepresented in so many different contexts for various reasons. Whether, the Batman misrepresentations, I think, are for one thing, for one reason. It's not that the martial arts are necessarily bad in there. It's just that the way he's apprehensive about applying force, and then having those be one-off finishes. It's like, no, you need to apply a little more force for those to be, like, maybe use a baton, like a metal baton even, or in the case if he's got metal on his, if he's got metal knuckles or something.
Or those gauntlet things with
Right.
that he used against Ra's al Ghul and the sword.
Exactly. If there's a little bit of enhancement, yeah, okay. And I remember in the one movie they gave him the mechanical knee brace that allowed him to kick through brick.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like
That's right,
that.
so he could fight with Superman.
But he didn't have it. No, it was for it because he had no knee cartilage in his knee.
That's right.
That's a whole different suit.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like old man Bruce fighting fucking
Right.
Superman.
Yeah, that's a whole
completely different story.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like way later. That's like at the end of the Batman story, of the Frank Miller Batman
But
story.
even then, I guess in the comics now they've given Batman it's basically like a Gundam. It's an ultimate bat or some shit where
Batman has a Gundam.
effectively, but it's also I think it's also got cosmic powers now.
Of course.
So he's one of the, but I think they're making it.
So it's like a enhanced Iron Man suit for Batman.
More, but
More or less.
more like no, it's more like Gundam.
It's more of a Gundam, okay.
Because it's like 30 feet tall.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's like an actual Gundam type, maybe even 50 feet tall or some shit. But I think they're making it a evil storyline.
Is that so he can fight with Darkseid or something? Or
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That makes
Again,
sense,
it's well.
he would need armor like that.
I think
to
he
fight Darkseid.
invented it to fight with Darkseid, but what the storyline, I believe, I just read it in CBR.
Okay.
So the memory may be off, but I think they're using that suit to make him a big bad for the universe because it was made to fight cosmic level beings.
Well, Bruce is the craziest human.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the most insane human. He's more insane than Luthor. In many ways, Lex Luthor is like the last human who can stand up against these people.
Well, right. That's
the fucked up thing.
That's the reason that we never actually see Luthor as a complete villain because he's justified in his actions, even down to. That's why him and Superman have all those talks in the sense of
Luthor's really the only person that they're really the only people that understand each other.
Absolutely. We're supposed to understand that as viewers.
They have
readers. You know?
They have a great relationship. I like how how Luthor is explored with various alternate universes. Mm-hmm. How like we realize his humanity through these different like sociological explorations of humanity, and he's a very nuanced character. Yeah, he's actually got.
They're doing a really good job with him on Supergirl.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That show, I don't
know how far you've gotten in that.
No, I haven't gotten very far because I'm trying to. I realized I started getting myself a little thin. I stopped paying attention to Legends because it started getting.
Yeah, it went way off the rails, but I think in a way that...
I feel like shows that go off into the weeds like that, they're doing that because the timing has to swing around for some other...
Right,
like,
exactly.
There's another show that has to meet it, and so they're just filling out time or killing time.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what the show was intentionally set up for in the first place.
Oh.
It was always... I mean, because it was based... There's no... source material within DC that it was based off.
Yeah.
So I think what they do is they use it to fill any narrative loopholes that come in with their major crossover events. So if something has to happen, well, they put Constantine in there now too. So whether it has to happen with magic or with the multiverse, they can write it into Legends. And because there's no source material to mess up, the storyline can basically go anywhere. Because now it's gone in such a place where, as a viewer, I'm like, okay, I realize there's teenagers watching this show, but where are we going? But like you're saying, it's it definitely seems like they're filling in something.
The only thing that I can think of is that have they introduced a Dr. Manhattan-like character in that show? I can't remember. I haven't watched the last 4 or 5 episodes. I feel like so. Because if they have, then there's an opportunity for the Legends to save the Green Lantern and then correct the entire DC universe. I'm really big on them restoring Green Lantern, like to the.
I don't know if they're allowed to bring him onto the.
Oh man, that'd be so cool if they did.
There's like Batman and then I think a couple Superman. And maybe Green Lantern. There's IP that's off limits for television for its own series, which is why.
But didn't they introduce a Superman character in?
But he can't. He didn't have his own series.
Oh,
that's what I'm saying. He's a side character.
Yeah.
He's a supporting character. And the same thing happened in
Titans.
Titans.
Yeah.
They brought in Batman, but he's supporting. Well, he's actually the antagonist.
Yeah.
In
Well,
part of the series.
He's always gonna be Dick's antagonist. Like.
I mean, but he was straight murdering people.
Finally.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to catch up on that too.
Oh shit! Sorry, spoilers.
Ha ha ha. No, that's okay. I feel like Batman has been nerfed in so many ways. They don't really let us see the kind of character that he has to be to do the things that he does.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in literature there's the whole, they explore the concept of the hero becoming a monster to defeat a monster, because that's the only battlefield that you can approach that.
That's what Gotham is really good
Yeah.
about, like exploring.
And so, like, I feel like we're not given in a lot of the portrayals of Batman, especially like the animated series, and I love that show.
Yeah.
That was like, I think that's everyone's real first kiss with Batman.
I don't think most people who understood or thought they understood Batman have understood this aspect of him until very recently, because there's a few reasons. First off, the previous generation didn't believe in PTSD, so the idea of the character being created in a time when people didn't even believe in PTSD, that wasn't going to come through, but it was always going to have been there. So it's like the layer of, there's an element of Batman's creation that we couldn't even have understood until
decades of research,
almost a century later, when society has changed enough to say, okay, yes, you have PTSD because you saw your parents get killed. Yes, you're a little psychotic because you allowed a child to fight crime alongside a grown man. Yes, you're a little crazy because you ran around in fucking underwear, effectively, and let a kid run around in underwear, effectively, because you wanted to make people feel scared and
leverage
intimidated.
the technological resources of a multinational.
And then once you realize the reason that the Robin has to wear yellow is it's that a training mechanism, so that if you can like surprise people when you're wearing the loudest color, then you'll eventually become part of the shadow. That's fucked up. You have a kid running around in the brightest color to train him to be part of the shadow. So there's a whole lot of elements to what made Batman Batman.
Well, that's one of those things that I always thought made Nightwing like scarier than Batman, because he's like Batman 2.0.
Right.
And if it weren't for Dick's like humanity, really, because he's like actually a better person than Bruce.
Yeah, that's what Titans is really good about showing.
But like, you know, if it wasn't for that, we would have like a much scarier version of Batman. I don't think that
Which is the Arkham Knight.
Yeah.
That's why I think Red Hood and Arkham Knight are very good storylines to show what happens when Batman's training goes wrong.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even the Azrael, because I guess he didn't necessarily train directly with Batman, but it's like
you end up with something that's like worse than the League of Shadows.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Which is ultimately why I think it is interesting to actually dissect the character to get to a point where we can say, yeah, Batman's almost anti-hero status. He's not, there's so much about him that when we're looking at it with clear lenses and not the rose tinted lenses, then we see, yeah, he's not a good person. He's in a lot of ways. He has a lot of good elements to him, but he also has a lot of bad that the audience used to be willing to overlook, that I'm not sure that we can overlook now. Even down to Bruce could fix all the poverty because he's wealthy enough, but he allows it to thrive so he can have some sort of like messianic complex. Yeah.
Well, you know, I feel like if Marvel and DC wanted to do an amalgam with very little character massaging to get it to work, they could combine. If they could take the mask off and reveal Frank Castle, and it wouldn't really miss anything, because I feel like there's a similarity between the Punisher and Batman.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Batman vs Punisher was about him being faced with reality that he
Yeah.
was not far from
That he
Frank.
was almost the same,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same kind of vigilante. Like he just employed
Because
different
Batman
methods.
Spawn was a similar
Yeah.
thing. Like, well, because both Spawn and Punisher were anti-heroes.
Yeah.
Um, so those good.
I think that stuff, those kind of like intersection dissections are actually really interesting
Mm.
because, you know, when we get to with a lot of these stories, they end up revealing like that vigilante nature or
Yeah.
how far somebody's willing to go to realize the justice they're seeking for whatever, and then it becomes a retribution story, and then it's more vendetta and vigilantism, and then next thing you know, they're a criminal, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why I've always really liked James Bond, even though it's like this weird colonial spook. Let's go assassinate people. Like it's sanctioned assassinations. He's a state sanctioned ninja
Yeah.
who is out in public flaunting England's wealth. And I always thought that was kind of fun. I'm not even sure if that's possible.
No, there's no way. I mean, you can't. There's spies and they exist. The way that it happens in real life, one person is probably 1/100th of his experience.
Yeah. I
Like
imagine that
they
a lot of
have
it's
one
social
part of it.
engineering.
Oh
Like,
fuck
that
yeah.
it's like that
Yeah.
like the actual spy is,
So
much from the
there's a
far
story
removed.
where a guy infiltrated a um, activist organization and had a girlfriend inside the organization, but he had like a wife at home.
Oh wow.
And at one point, I guess he. The only reason he broke the character was because he was going to get married to his fake fiance, and he I guess finally got a crisis of conscience. Um, and that's when he was like, I'm an undercover
I
cop,
can't do this
and
anymore.
I've been investigating your group, and I know the relationship was this, but I actually have, I forget the guy's name or forget the activist group, but it's one of these things where again, you know, the circumstances under which that happened are not to go assassinate somebody. It's investigate some fucking activist group that's bullshit.
Yeah.
So when he's fucking somebody, it's not to save the planet. It's because he's given some bullshit assignment that then they give him permission to fuck people. This is another
And
problem
then he ended up going native and
right.
revealed the operation.
Yeah. So again, this is where it gets weird. Where um, you not just the United States, but when the government sanctions people to have sex for a purpose, whether it's male or female, it's fucked. Because then you get the problems where the United States doesn't sign UN agreements to not use rape as a weapon of war. And then you look at the history of the shit in the United States where it's like, oh yeah, they've definitely done that before. So when you have the capacity for law enforcement and military to use sex legally in the country and outside the country, it puts things in a weird spot. That's what I'm saying in the sense of I don't think it's necessarily innocuous for us to have this James Bond figure that makes it seem glamorous. It's like the glamorization of that is why, not why, it's part of the reason why we're okay with it happening and not revolting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? In the sense of, this is what I'm starting to dissect about the stuff that we're fed.
It's because we want it to be the fantasy. We want the high fantasy to be the existing state, so we're willing to put up with the things that get us there.
Yep. It's not bad that the thing exists. It's bad that is what our psyche wants it to be when we hear about the bad.
Yeah.
Then our first instinct is to be like, well, are you sure? Is it really this way? Because I've seen the movie, and in this, that a lot of times it's good, and it's like, whether it's somebody who was falsely accused of a crime because of a race, or a woman who says like she was raped or whatever, and the guy's an authority figure, whether in the military or police force, because of the way they're presented in the media, we have a predisposition to automatically support the person in the law in the uniform, or the person who's undercover, because either one is a strange application of that. And the only reason I'm even, it's like
Man, I watched a body camera video today of a man approaching an officer. He had taken his shirt off. You know, I think on the internet culture that means he's serious. But he was swinging a chain around, like a big fucking, a chain that you use to pull something out of something, not just a tow chain, but like this is a fucking chain.
Yep.
And the police officer is backing up, fires his taser at him, and doesn't do anything. And I missed, but he's holding it down like it's still firing, but it doesn't matter. And he's like, "Sir, put the chain down, get on the ground." You know, over and over again, the guy keeps coming at him, keeps swinging this chain.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, and then he informs him. He's like, "I will shoot you," and it keeps going on. It keeps going. I will discharge my weapon. He's like, he keeps radioing, and he's like, "Guys, this guy's not backing down. I need help." And finally, the guy gets close enough. The officer just shoots him.
Why doesn't he have a dart gun?
Huh?
Why doesn't he have a dart gun?
Well, you know,
if we can take down a
question.
fucking rhino, if we can take down a gorilla,
if we can take down an elephant,
if we can take down an elephant, we have tranquilizer guns.
Yeah.
Why do officers not have tranquilizer guns instead of, you go from a taser, which doesn't work a lot of times,
to a fucking
firearm? There's a tranquilizer in the middle.
Yeah.
We have those in video games.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly like in Phantom it's Metal Gear Solid Phantom Pain, you can use tranquilizer darts, and you're often tasked with using them because you don't want to leave bodies around.
Yeah.
And it's like, if these things can exist in violent video games,
the tranquilizer gun is permeated all the way down to, like, you know, dick and fart joke culture in that Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. You know.
Yeah.
He finds that tranquilizer gun. He's talking about how he's going to use it on his girlfriend, and they're going to have crazy, doped-up sex.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, they exist.
They totally
fucking
exist.
Tranquilizer guns exist.
We know about them. Everyone knows about them.
Everybody knows about them. And it's a matter of,
you know,
the way that shit escalates from taser to firearm without the tranquilizer dart in the middle. It's because we're shown the black man as being a monster that needs to be shot to be put down. Not just tranquilized, just put down.
They just need to be put down.
And people are so used to that that they're okay with it.
That's terrible.
and again, this is why it's like, it's not innocuous when these things are portrayed in the media the way they are. And that's why, like, Moneypenny never fucks.
You know,
Moneypenny never fucks. Why does Moneypenny never get laid?
Moneypenny should get laid.
Moneypenny should get laid. She should get laid just as often, if not more often. Oh, but no, we need to have her chased. She's been chased pretty much the entire series.
No, Bond should be like taking care of her like every time he's back in London. Because
it shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be Bond. She should be getting, like, this is the problem.
You really should, though.
This is the problem. We have somebody who is in love with Bond, who's chased for Bond, who never gets it from Bond, who doesn't get it from anybody else, to fulfill the male fantasy. This is, again, it's like, these things, it's like, man, I would love to not have that analysis, but it's too hard to ignore when the results are what they are.
Yeah, not just, you know, obvious that, but there's like a pattern of behavior that extends for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Hear that, Broccoli Brothers or showrunner or whatever, next Bond movie, you know, let Moneypenny get it. She's been waiting a long fucking time, and she deserves that shit. Just let her have it this one next movie, and don't fucking kill her. Seriously.
Just for moving the plot along.
Yeah, seriously.
It's damsel in distress.
Yeah, no. Moneypenny can take care of herself. She's a fully trained MI6 agent. She just happens to be the only one who can handle Bond. that actually makes her more badass than any of the other handlers. No, it does. Like, who else can handle Bond?
Mm-hmm.
M can barely handle Bond.
Well, that's not true. M fucked Bond's head up.
Well, now, but
Like in this is okay. This Bond,
Judi Dench M could barely handle Bond.
right? But this Bond is weird because he is mostly brute force.
Yeah, and the current M is actually a throwback
Grace.
to the original M.
Right, but then this M completely just used him as a pawn.
Yeah.
So
well, that's because he's the throwback to the original M.
Yeah.
Not the Judi Dench M. And it was cool to have her as M, but she was not as heavy-handed because the Cold War had changed.
Yeah.
It was a different Cold War.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how they carry out like the remainder of the, because I think they got like Thunderball back or something like that. So they're actually going to be able to make Thunderball the way they want to or something. I can't remember. I keep reading about like the potential for a different Bond, and then every time there's some controversy, Daniel Craig is announced to be reprising the role one last time. It's like seriously, this is like we're like over a decade. He's starting to look like he's been beat up too many times.
Henry Cavill, I think, probably should
That'd be a good Bond.
Yeah. I mean, not to say that Idris Elba shouldn't be.
He'd be a good Bond too.
Yeah. He's a little old.
Yeah.
I think he's just like 54 now, maybe. If they should have fucking done it like 10 years ago.
But, yeah, that would have made sense.
Not to say that he can't keep it going till he's 65 or some shit.
I mean,
that's why I'm like, I don't know.
Roger Moore looked old when he was playing Bond.
Yeah.
And
so did Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah. And so did Timothy Dalton.
Yeah.
They all kind of looked old.
That's true.
I think Daniel Craig starting out was like the youngest looking one.
Yeah, because he was the youngest.
Even Roger Lazenby.
I think he was the youngest when he was cast.
Definitely the only one that looked like he could dish out that beating.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because I think he was the first one where they were making him actually a martial artist.
Yeah.
Or
no.
I mean, that
did the judo chop.
That was actually. Yeah. Doing stunts and shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they definitely stepped up the level of like vehicular choreography with Pierce Brosnan.
Oh yeah.
But Bond movies have always delivered a chase scene, like either a foot chase or a car chase, or I feel like they've kind of always set the standard for a good chase. Ronin has a good chase scene too with Robert De Niro. Car chases are tough though.
Yeah, it's getting played out in a sense of they have to be so long and so many things. It's just a matter of.
Well, cars don't.
I think Michael Bay has ruined car chases for everybody.
Well, cars don't blow up.
Right.
There are so many airbags and there's so many safety features that when they don't really flip either.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they just kind of squat down and skid to a halt. Only certain types of vehicles have a tendency to flip over, really. And most of the time they just spin around and they get locked up with each other.
Yeah. Well, and then if you ever go to the places where they have these car chases, nobody's having a fucking car chase in Paris. You see the traffic?
Yeah, fucking gridlock.
I mean, nobody, and this is where it's like, in 2019, it's too hard to it's not that you won't get taken out of the...
What special civic event was going on that day that they had such open and wide
streets? Right, yeah.
They closed the streets off that day, and it just happened to coincide with this... Well, you know what? That makes it really easy to determine when criminals are going to act. They're only going to work on days when the streets are wide open. I mean, otherwise they just won't get away.
Yeah.
They'll get stuck in traffic.
Right, yeah. When's the last time you heard of a successful bank robber getting away? This shit does not happen.
Well, I read about one of the crypto exchanges getting, taken for like $40 million recently.
Yeah, but that's not a...
And that's kind of a bank robbery.
I mean, but they didn't drive away in cars.
That's true. They drove away on the information highway, the information superhighway. Yeah, that's the future of bank heists. It's all keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
And getting somebody inside a building to put a piece of hardware in a room,
Yep.
and that person doesn't even work there. They just happen to have a fucking maintenance uniform that looks like the maintenance uniform used by the guys in the building.
Now, I've heard of someone was saying they were doing a penetration test, and their strategy to get the software loaded was they said, "Oh, my phone's dead. Can you charge this real quick?" And somebody just like they went around to different people, and the first person just fucking
Sure thing, buddy. I'll help you out.
yeah. You know, again,
Just auto-loaded some
that's
software
all you have to
package.
do to get into these systems in the sense of, yeah, they have a lot of security, but it just takes one dumbass person to get tricked. Because this is one of the things where, when it comes to door locks in apartment complexes or gated communities or whatever, people always let people in. You should never fucking do that, but it just feels rude. But the door is there for a reason, and people subconsciously don't want to be rude, and it's like, you know, that's how people end up fucking getting killed or robbed or some shit, is because one person doesn't want to be rude and one person takes advantage of that. And it's not, it's like you don't want this to be a way that people stop being nice to others. It's just more so, um I was talking to an old teacher at a high school, and the kids do that. And it's one of those things where this is where you can't, you get into these habits because you're
You're taught to be polite and civil.
exactly, and then it makes you actually do things that circumvent safety features that are put there for a reason.
Yeah, best practices of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my mom's from Hong Kong, and my dad, well, he's from Kansas, but I was born in New York, and he had lived in New York for a while before I was born. And I lock doors. I lock doors when it's just me inside.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I lock the door when I'm going outside to the car to get something. And I mean, because I almost always have my keys. I don't think about it. I just lock doors. It's just the training was successful. And I've been told that it's like, why do you lock the door behind you? It's like, and they're like, you know, no one's coming in after you. It's like, I don't know. That's just the example that was presented to me when I was very little. You just lock the door behind you. I think it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
Why'd you put a lock on the door and not use it?
It seems like such a waste of time and resources to do something like that.
Well, it's just like people who get safes that you can carry.
Yeah.
Or they get a safe that's small and they don't bolt it to the ground in a way that's not easily, like you would have to need a buzzsaw or something to get it up, or a metal saw.
You need something that's gonna move something else.
Right.
Yeah, I always thought the idea of a safe was really just it's to delay the inevitable. Because
I mean, basically, yeah.
almost anything can be opened. A lock is just a way to delay the inevitable. If somebody really wants in, they'll get in. But it's enough of a deterrent that it's also a deterrent, but it's enough of a deterrent that people don't want to mess with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone knows what it looks like when someone's trying to break into a place.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're not the person that owns the place,
you don't need those things.
Yeah. And if you own the place, you just do what every normal person does. They like call their friend who has the backup key, or they go digging in the fucking place where they hid the key, or they call a locksmith because they don't want to damage their own property.
Exactly.
And it's worth them to not damage their property because fucking windows are expensive.
Yeah.
So we've actually had an extremely high pollen count this past several days. A few days ago, I started feeling like absolute crap, and then I realized it was seasonal, and I hadn't like used the neti pot recently and rinsed out my sinus. Holy crap! So I'll take like, you know, I use like a gallon of distilled water, and I'll just mix that stuff and keep rinsing out my sinus until nothing else comes out. And I'll do this in sometime during the spring transition of mold and and pollen, when everything starts to getting wet and staying wet for a while. I'll do that once then, and also like at the end of the fall when it starts to dry out, just to make sure everything's out as everything's getting cold and dry. But man, it's been terrible. The last 3 or 4 days, I would like close my eyes at night, and then I feel like I would just open them and it's morning, and feeling like I hadn't slept at all, like feeling like I've been doing things the whole night basically, because seasonal allergies and pollen.
Yeah.
It sucks. And usually I try it. I don't think it's like a more of the traditional like pollen bearing foliage. I think it's just that we're having a lot of temperature shifts where we're crossing that cold threshold where it tricks the plants into dumping what they've got.
Totally. Yeah, I can feel that shit right now.
Like yesterday, I felt like I couldn't drink enough water.
Yeah.
It was funny actually. It's like holy crap, how much do I have to drink to feel hydrated? This sucks.
Yeah, staying hydrated is a motherfucker.
Yeah. And it's only going to get more difficult as like our government allows to our water processing standards to just slide.
Yeah.
And with places like Nestle just buying up water rights, they're not even a U.S. company. I hate Nestle actually.
Yeah, Nestle's the devil.
They're like statements made by that company that just make me
fuck Nestle.
Yeah.
This message is brought to you by fuck Nestle.
You know what? I can't even think of any of their products, like, because every time I see the word Nestle, I'm just completely turned off.
Well, it sucks because Nestle Crunch is good.
Yeah, but
I like Nestle Crunch, but fuck it, I'm not buying that shit. Like,
I'm sure that Hershey's makes a viable competitor to the.
It's
the
just
Crunch
rice, rice and chocolate. Like rice.
Yeah.
Krispies.
If Hershey doesn't make one, then
we can make our own, and it'd probably be better if it's not just.
Oh, that's like a thin Rice Krispie with chocolate. That's right.
Yeah.
Take that, Nestle.
Yeah. Nothing special.
Seriously, if it's just a thin Rice Krispie treat with some chocolate like worked into it.
Yeah.
You can actually make way more per batch of Reese's or of Rice Krispie treats than.
Yep.
Oh man, I've been missing out on opportunities like my whole life. This is like when I discovered that I could mix my own concentration of what was it? Fucking Kool-Aid. Huh, and a tick on me.
Whoa.
Where'd it go? Crap.
Oh, that's no good.
Get out of that, you motherfucker.
Shit.
It's not going anywhere. Huh. See, do I have another tick on me anywhere?
So I should check me. Fuck.
Ha! This is one of those times where I feel like this is what I get for living kind of in the country. I don't think I have anything on me. You usually feel and moving. They usually come in with the dog.
Fucking hate ticks.
Yeah, you read about the tick that carries the I guess it's a bacteria that causes like
Vegetarian makes you not, or makes you allergic to beef.
to meat protein.
Yeah, I don't really care. I already don't eat meat most of the time anyway, but that would suck. But it wouldn't affect me that much.
Yeah, no, it definitely just sucks. It sucks for people that are like where that's like a primary component of their diet.
That seems like Darwinism to me. This is to me a point where it's like
Better learn how to cook chicken, guys.
or
or just fish.
or our society has gotten so what's the word? Eating meat has become a crutch where before it meant you were a good hunter, now it just means you like burgers. And nature's like, here you go. Sorry, that's not a good way to be.
You can't have burgers all the time anymore.
No,
Gotta...
that's not good for anybody. That's not the way our bodies are meant to take in meat.
And not just meat, but we're not supposed to get meat produced with that much high hormone content.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, if you go out hunting on foot and you're not doing the tree stand stuff, because the tree stand stuff is not fucking hunting and gathering.
No, that's
like,
just
sitting and hunting.
Posting up and waiting for something to come to you.
It's not the same shit. It's not.
That's luring.
Yeah, you can't be athletic and do that. It's totally trapping. It's not hunting and gathering. So when we're talking about if somebody's out hunting and gathering, yeah, fucking eat a burger every day because you're burning a shitload, and you're not going to be hunting and gathering every day either. So if somebody was actually doing that, the person that was gonna go out and kill, well, because you're not going to be hunting something that you're going to turn into a burger. That's just like,
no, I think you're supposed to hunt things that present a threat to your crops or your livestock.
Right.
Or the things that continue to produce things like milk or wool or whatever kind of sustainable type of livestock farming that work out.
So having livestock for meat farming is something that I don't think we were ever actually supposed to be doing as a species.
My understanding,
and it turned into something that became a societal staple.
Yeah.
But genetically, I think it's like put us on a very wrong track.
Well, my understanding of like a dairy farm, you can have a lot of dairy cows in a small space and it'll work. But if you were to use that same number of like beef cow, you have to have huge expansive
right, because you can't. I don't think you eat you're not eating the female cows.
No,
so it's only like the male cows.
Yeah.
That are.
They gotta drive them all over the Wyoming and Nebraska plains to make sure they can get enough like food so they can. That stuff's nuts. But I remember. I can't remember what it's. The Dutch disease. It's when a commodity becomes desired to a point where the people that are creating it are priced out of their own market. So it happened in Scotland with beef, and in Ireland with beef, because desire for corned beef was really high in Europe, and they got to a point where they weren't able to buy their own beef. And then, a more modern variation is quinoa. So in South America, quinoa is a staple. What used to be a staple grain.
But now it's too priced out of the market.
Because American demand for quinoa is so high, we're willing to pay so much for it that the people who grow it can't even buy it for themselves.
Damn.
And it's interesting. Like, I'm sure there are other examples of this that I'm unaware of, but this is something that capitalism allows to happen.
Yeah. And promotes.
It promotes it. It says you will be rewarded if you can return these conditions.
And that's the problem with.
That's so fucked up.
You know, when you sit in on these business ethics classes, and the people who are not not thinking it's a problem to exploit these populations because they're getting monetary rewards. They don't actually care about the long-term impacts or whether they don't think that polluting those people's areas has an impact on their land long-term, so it's okay to put all the toxic waste there. There's like all these things about...
These containers are guaranteed to last for 50 years.
Yeah.
We'll move them before then.
Nationalism in tandem with capitalism are two of the worst things to happen to humanity, in the sense of what I'm realizing as a construct is, if capitalism effectively means that profit is the end goal, then whatever is being profited from is a secondary goal. And in that, that means that nothing will be done primarily for itself, and if the primary goal is profit in the capitalist system. So this means whether it's, I mean, obviously medicine in America is clearly not done for the sake of medicine, it's done for the sake of profit. Whether it's, space exploration.
That's why it's called a medical industry.
Right, exactly. And this is the issue where I don't think people are really looking at the implications of not doing things for the sake of themselves. If we are doing medical research for the sake of profit and not for the sake of medical research, then the end is not actually the most prolific medical research. The end is profit.
Yeah.
And this is the fundamental flaw.
I think that it's pretty obvious that it's about profit when we have to rely on non-profit organizations to find funding to secure enough money for the research to even happen.
Yeah.
And even those people get paid.
But nonprofits have also been weaponized in that context too.
I know, that's what I mean. But that's the thing. They have to exist for these things to happen on some level, because even the state's not willing to promote certain areas of research.
Yeah.
Like GW was like no stem cell research, right?
Right.
It's like that put American medical research behind, and then lo and behold, I think it's like Norway or Sweden or something. China is able to do stuff with stem cells that we're like, fuck. Oh. We've been, kind of screwed in that sense, in so many ways, where just losing out on resources for research.
Yeah. There's a lot to us also being told from the same people that are preventing those research endeavors from happening, that we can't have a state-owned research and development firm that then shares the profits from those developments with the people, because if you frame it like that, for whatever reason, people think it's wrong. Because then on the other end, people will not like the fact that Mark Zuckerberg owns Facebook, and he's got pretty much single,
because all of his contemporaries left.
Yeah,
they all cashed in.
He's got dominion over the corporation and effectively unilateral.
In a lot of ways, the things that NASA has developed for the space program, like the things that bleed down to civilian applications, like communication systems or
foam mattresses.
Yeah, the microwave, things like that. In a lot of ways, we as a society do kind of get the profit from that research. The profit is that we have this technology, or to allow for better, postural alignment when sleeping.
But we get it.
We'll get that anyways, but
we get it on a scheduled release. So we're 5 generations behind the best anyway.
That's true. And we still have to pay for it the whole time.
And
we still have to pay for it the whole time.
So we have to pay for it from the consumer side. So it's not profit. It's not, because we're paying for taxes.
Yeah.
And we're paying on the consumer side. So it's the exact opposite of profit.
That just means we're paying for it for a longer period of time.
We benefit. There's a difference between benefit and profit.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's not a positive sum for the civilian. It's a negative sum. So
because we end up paying for it for even longer.
Yeah. So we're getting taxed, paying interest, and being presented these technologies on a delayed scale, on a delayed time scale.
To enjoy the benefits 20 years later.
Yeah. So even in the sense of what's it?
And the only thing that other countries want to buy are our missiles.
Yeah, I mean, governments.
They want to buy our missiles and our missile systems and our defense systems.
To keep them safe from us.
Yeah.
As if we're gonna give them the best anyway.
As if our missile systems didn't have backdoors that we could access.
Exactly. Well, which China also put backdoors in so they can take over control, which we changed the laws on in 2013
Yeah.
to allow that to happen again. It wasn't the he who shall not be named. It was the wolf in sheep's clothing that did that. If you can parse what I'm saying, good for you. I'm not gonna speak their names. I'm not gonna speak their names because they don't fucking deserve that shit.
Yeah.
But
also, fuck that guy who signed the Rave Act.
yeah, fuck that dude too, creepy motherfucker.
Yeah.
If you don't know who we're talking about, sorry.
He also made it really difficult to secure like bankruptcy from student loan debt too.
Yeah.
To find debt relief.
Yep.
Like
very, very openly.
Yeah. So
fuck that dude.
Yeah, fuck that dude.
Yeah. It's again. There's a lot of stuff where it's not binary. It's not red and blue anymore. These people play golf together. They don't play golf with us. You and I cannot go fucking play golf with these people. They play golf with each other though.
Yeah.
So when they pretend to be fucking enemies to get... This is what kills me is when people will start taking politicians' sides over people they grew up with, over issues that don't even necessarily affect them directly. That's some social engineering on a level as to why Americans are not taught about social engineering, because then...
We have to go to school for that now.
Yeah. If Americans knew about the social engineering that the government was doing to them,
they should be mad as hell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it all gets deflected to Russia as if Russia is the only one. Of course, they're doing social engineering. But this is like Schrodinger's social attack, because then if you throw it out there, the attack is there and it's not. It doesn't even you don't even have to do it once the thought is out there. Yeah, it's there and it's not.
It's the inception of chaos.
Yep, absolutely.
And at that point, it's just a matter of letting people's paranoia do all the work.
Even down to the Pentagon coming out and saying they investigate UFOs. Duh, that's not anything fucking new. Of course you have to investigate an unidentified flying object. You haven't confirmed that you found anything extraterrestrial, so you saying that is just stirring the pot. You're trying to intentionally fucking make people think the wrong thing.
There's also they could call it something else.
Of course, but they choose to say UFO to keep it in the realm of the mystical, in the realm of the abstract enough for dumb Americans to think they're talking about extraterrestrials. And they should have, if they were talking about extraterrestrials, they would have said extraterrestrials. Yeah. But they're trying to make people, again, this is the social engineering. This is the genius of fucking that Scarface scene. They didn't show anything. Yeah. Everybody fills in the blanks with the chainsaw. Yeah. They didn't show you anything. Yeah. You heard the chainsaw, you saw the blood, you didn't see anything. But Americans fill it in, and to this day, people will think that's one of the most gruesome scenes, but they didn't show you anything.
Yeah, it's like that scene in Punisher when he's got the guy in the chain, he's chained him up, and he's behind him, and he's like, oh, you're gonna talk, and he lights a blowtorch, and he's like spouting off information about how hot the torch is, and how it's so hot it'll fry his nerves. He won't even feel it, that it'll just feel cold. And then he stabs him in the back with a popsicle, and the guy starts screaming, and he just twists it in his back. And all the while, he's like holding the torch on a stake.
Oh man!
See, that's a variation of the Punisher. That's like, Batman wouldn't do that, but the Punisher would.
Yeah, yeah.
So in a lot of ways, how they're similar, they're not the same. I think that's, but I also think that Frank Castle goes to a place that he really can't. He can still come back from, and I don't think that Bruce can come back from.
Well, Frank Castle's killed a lot of people.
Yeah, he's
killed a shitload of people.
I saw a blood count or a body count, and he actually has killed more people than Wolverine. he's like the killingest, most killingest dude.
That's bro.
I'm sure that the Ghost Rider, if we were aware of the entire history of the Ghost Rider, there's probably more, because I feel like that's what the Ghost Rider does, is he takes people's lives. But
that's questionable, because is taking someone to hell the same as killing them? That's a good. I think that's a good segue to Lucifer.
That's a great question,
because it's you can come back from hell, and one of the things.
That's right.
You know, people passing back and forth
came back from hell, and he was all.
If someone does not, and this is the difference between Enoch and everyone else in the Bible. Enoch does not die to go to heaven.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that separates him from everyone. So again,
that's why he doesn't have a gospel.
Is Ghost Rider technically killing people,
or is he just taking them?
Taking them to hell is not the same as killing their corporeal bodies.
Then that's like.
Because also part of hell is supposed to be that you're suffering in your corporeal body and your spiritual body.
Well, what was his name? He carries them across the river Styx, and you got to give him coins. In Greek mythology. Takes people to Hades, anyways.
Yeah, whoever, because that's why they put the silver coins on their eyes to give it to whoever that guy is. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that guy doesn't kill them, but he transports them to Hades.
Yeah.
Of course, Hades really isn't a good corollary, because Hades is just the whole thing.
Right, it's the underworld. It's not punishment necessarily, which is what's. So there's Sheol or Sheol, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, which is what we call hell. And that's effectively the Hebrew place where you go, and it was created after Hades. Hades predates Sheol, and it was a combination of these that define what we call in modern parlance as hell.
Man, there's so many hells in Chinese culture. There's like 10,000.
I know there's like hell dollars where you can buy your ancestors out of hell and shit.
No, it's so that they can buy themselves a cool drink of water or a fan so they can keep themselves from overheating. Or that's when they're in that kind of hell. There's also there's the hell of waiting in line, and the hell of crying babies, and the hell of whatever it was is the thing that drives someone mad on Earth, and so that's the hell they live with, or something like that. I always thought it was interesting how Western and Eastern cultures both had this horrible place that if you were tormented, that's where you would end up. Or if you were a tormentor, you would end up in a place like that, being tormented. But it always kind of seemed interesting to me.
Well, because there's a clear emergence. It didn't always exist.
Yeah.
So in the sense of, that's why Hades didn't necessarily have to do with quote unquote punishment.
Yeah. Well, Hades is also one of Zeus's brothers, so.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's also it's like
that's right.
As far as in the West, the notion of punishment became something that got also displaced to the afterlife. So part of it was that you could buy your way out of these afterlife punishments, and this is what caused the Lutheran split and the 99 pillars being posted on the church wall as to why. Because this is what was the basis of. You were giving soldiers the notion that they could go to war, commit all these atrocities, and then come back and use the loot to buy their way out of the shit. And that's why Luther was like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
You can't do that shit. And effectively, that is the root of a lot of the Western dispute over why they separate church and state.
Yeah. So with hell banknotes for the Chinese hells, here on Earth, you can buy give me some number, a two-digit number.
15.
You can buy 15 trillion hell banknotes, probably for $5 US, and then you can transfer that to your loved ones by creating their little effigy thing and putting it on the little burning pan thing. It'll burn up. You just got to burn it up. That's how you give it to them. You burn it up, and when they get there, it loads up in their account, and that number, 15 trillion hell banknotes, that's enough for a glass of water. or a blast of mist with a fan for a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
That's the money's worthless because it's hell.
Yeah.
So there's you can throw as much money at them as you want to. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's part of the. You're just gonna burn it up. I think that's a kind of an amusing cultural. Yeah, can't take it with you kind of thing.
I mean, again, it's like.
And that's for the people on the living side.
Right,
That's for us. That's not for like
exactly.
They're dead.
Yeah.
They're not gonna do anything with these hell banknotes.
Yeah.
They're in hell.
Yeah. Which.
So I mean, you mentioned Lucifer, and I've been watching this show. I'm into the second season now. It's actually really, really enjoyable. Like as a detective story, it's enjoyable because, he's always like, tell me what you desire. He doesn't actually make people do anything.
Nope.
And and whenever they ask him stuff, he's like bold with the truth about it. He just tells the truth because he only has a few things to hide. Mostly that, he's the devil and that his real form is burnt up and looks like he's in a lot of pain. Like physical pain. His body makes him look like he's in pain. And but otherwise, he's a charming dude who's got like mad charisma and can throw wild parties, and everyone wants to hang out with him because he's the coolest guy.
Well, because that's what he looks like as his original angel form.
Yep.
So that's the interesting part about Lucifer and Satan aren't the same person.
No. He gets mad.
Lucifer is the angel counterpart of the Satan, which is the underworld ruler.
Yeah. Or Samael, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's also a different name for him.
Yeah. Before he gets cast from heaven to go do something that he didn't want to do.
Azazel is not Satan. Like, because Azazel is also a demon that is like high rank, or he's also an angel that gets cast out and becomes a demon. There's a few. There's like, because they're the fallen angels.
Yeah.
I think Raphael is one of them.
Not the Ninja Turtle.
way predates and is cooler.
Yeah.
But even a minute deal, in the sense of like them effectively bringing the Nephilim storyline.
Yeah.
They do that in the show eventually. It's interesting. I won't spoil it.
I've read the Wikipedia thing in its entirety, so I have an idea of what's coming up. I just haven't seen it all play out.
It's different when you watch it versus reading it on Wikipedia.
So I screwed up because I just clicked on it, and I was like 3 episodes into season 4 on Netflix before I realized that I was watching the 4th season. So imagine my confusion. I'm like, what the fuck? Who are these people? This is way too complex for a fucking new show.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on. And then I looked down, I was like, season 4. Oh man. I just put 4 hours into something that has like 3 seasons.
That's almost good though that you started in season 4.
Well, no, I stopped and started over at the beginning.
In the sense of the way that the story sets up, it almost doesn't matter where you drop in. In the sense that, how do I say this?
Well,
space-time's irrelevant to
from what
these beings.
From what I've observed, these stories are pretty much one-shots.
Right.
There's only they have these minor arcs that last a couple episodes, like tension with his mom, or tension with his brother. That's a season-long arc, of course.
That's kind of how the books were written. So they're not far off from the sentiment and style of how the books were written, but they take a different approach to the narrative.
I think that's a good thing.
I think so as well.
I think so
as well because there's things in the book. One of the characters is I think a 6-year-old girl when we were introduced. She's a 6 or 13 or some shit, but she dies.
Yeah.
And then her friend is then communicating with her back and forth, and then we find out the friend that's communicating is Lucifer's niece, and his Michael's daughter, or something like that. But it wouldn't. I don't think it would have worked on.
There are a lot of things within literature that work because they're very cerebral and they don't translate to any kind of visual medium. And then there's some things that are so obvious that, like, when you see it, it's like, that's exactly how I imagined it.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of time, what makes a good, like, graphic novel that can translate into a movie is that it has a lot of these visual story components that lead into an obvious place because the foreshadowing is strong. And I think that, like, that's an integral component of good storytelling. You have to have decent enough foreshadowing that keeps people, like, expecting something, but then you twist it a little bit so it's like, oh, but I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And then it goes on from there. And I think that's it's problematic when we have shows that are too predictable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or too formulaic or too mechanical, because then it's just about, someone getting pissed off and doing something, as opposed to a complex situation and people rising to the occasion to demonstrate their, built-in powers.
Well, that's why I was glad with the series that they didn't go exactly in the same way as the books, because then as a viewer, it does make you feel like your time was not wasted in getting something different out of it, because this is one of the... I think people who expect things to be exactly like the source material have unreasonable expectations. And then not only that, you're robbing yourself of a new experience, because if this is a different medium, you want it to tell a different story.
Yeah.
I guess,
mediums have their own, properties that can be capitalized upon to tell the story, to deliver the narrative. And I think it's kind of weird. It's kind of strange to me that people would even expect different mediums to have the same abilities. That's the whole, like, testing a fish on climbing a tree and monkeys on swimming.
Yeah.
Like,
well, here's the thing. So with comic books, the way storyboards are done, it's basically storyboarding
for visual media.
Right.
Yeah.
But because storyboards because the comics are usually 30 pages, 29, 30 pages, or it was either 29 or 32 or something. If they're the regular form, that's TV show length. So comic books are basically set for TV series, and they're episodic in their nature. So comic books are basically meant for TV the way they're written, not for film. So then when something like Blade gets adapted, or even Batman, I say Batman is a terrible adaptation to film, because they have to rush so much of the character development that plays out in hundreds of issues sometimes,
or they tap
into 2 hours.
Or they tap into one of the graphic novels, like the Frank Miller Batman series, where it's like, it's not really a series, it's year one, or it's everything that we got from what's his name, Christian Bale's rendition of Batman. Like, that's all a dark version of the Dark Knight, and it's not a serial exploration of the characters. It's not the comic. It's a much more
short form version.
Yeah, it's a highly focused graphic novel. It's just long enough that we can turn it into a movie. And that's cool. I like that stuff.
It's cool, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy it.
We can't watch that version of Batman over and over again, because that dude is a fucking killer. And that's just like...
And then I think part of it is... So if we're talking about one-off stories like Frank Miller's version, I think those work really well for on-screen, but then they don't tell the full story.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're trying to fit it into a larger narrative. Yeah. So then we get only allusions to the Frank Miller Dark Knight, and not the actual story, because then they're trying to stuff in the Broken Bat, and then you get the Broken Bat and the Dark Knight in one film, which makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, I know. It's like...
So this is why, I think some people are Batman fans, and then some people are comic book fans, and then some people are epic fans, and fans of epics. I'm a fan of epics, and I'm a comic book fan, so I have no problem when a comic is adapted to become an epic and is done well. However, I'm not going to act as if the movie suddenly usurps the comic book source material
Yeah.
in its epicness, because the episodes, which is the main, one of the main criteria for becoming epic, it has to be episodic.
Yeah.
In comic books, there's hundreds of episodes, so don't tell me, if anybody wants to challenge this, don't tell me that the movies are more epic. They're just not, by
No,
definition.
see, that's the thing. Is like I think that the Batman animated movies, they're good, and I see them as episodic.
Yeah.
They're episodes and they're self-contained.
Even the Dark Knight is two.
Yeah, that's
they
true.
did 2 films for that in the animated, which makes it worked.
Yeah.
Because you even got the Carrie, what's her name? Carrie Ryan, whatever, fucking Robin, the chick.
Oh yeah, the chick Robin.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the old Bruce.
Yeah. So they did it exactly like the comics, but it was.
Oh man, like
it was fucking great.
When he like broke that dude, like just breaks him, just keeps and like continues to break his arms and legs and just make sure he's not coming back.
Yeah.
Because he has to make
Because he's
it,
more brutal in this too.
Oh, well,
he's like way
he's
more
old.
Yeah.
He doesn't have time to like fuck
Exactly.
around. It's the same thing as like watching Old Man Logan. It's like he doesn't have time to mess around. He has to rely on a different kind of, motivation, because his shoulder doesn't work right.
Right.
And this guy's really young, and like it's when Alfred says to him, he's like, he would give you a run for your money in your prime, Bruce. Like, be careful. And then he's like, oh, I've got this. And he has to waylay the dude. And then he's like, we're taking back Gotham. Then the gang rises up with him. Yeah, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
That stuff's crazy. We can't have that in Batman the Animated Series.
No.
That wouldn't have flown. That would have been like, that would have destroyed the series.
Oh God. I mean, not at the time.
Yeah. But now we get to have it explored in a movie of like, the fall, the decline of America.
Well, and Mask of the Phantasm is largely to do with what that because that movie still holds up.
Mask of the Phantasm, well, that's because it's a good story.
It is.
It's actually
and
like a
they
Class A
transitioned
story.
from the animated series to movie form really well.
Oh yeah.
So I think that is actually a very crucial piece
What's
of
his name, like Kevin Conroy.
adaptation. Yeah.
That guy's got the greatest Batman voice.
Yeah. It's
And
quintessential for
fucking Mark Hamill is the best Joker. His voice for Joker is just like,
which is great when
haunts
he
me.
voices it on the video games.
dude, when he was on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back as the
Cock knocker.
or when he reads tweets in the Joker voice.
Yeah.
Like, that stuff's insane.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, Mark Hamill's a great voice actor.
Oh, yeah. It's a shame that Luke had to, cross
not
over
dead.
into the next, like...
I don't think
he's dead because...
I don't think he crossed over.
Oh,
I think
so?
what we saw were both projections.
Oh, yeah. Really?
Yeah, and I think that they may have had him cross over, but I think they were doing this thing where they didn't tell us what happened. We assumed.
Yeah.
So because my thing is, what they also have shown us in that same film is that Yoda, when he was crossed over, he can still affect the physical world because he struck that tree. So it doesn't even matter. When you're part of the Force, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, it just means that
that's what they've shown us now. Yeah. So I don't know. And they may take it to that in the next film, but because they have him in the next film and he looks like he's in battle.
What would be really cool is if in the next film he has his hand back, and then we'll know.
Yeah. If we'll know for sure.
Because his robot hand would be somewhere else.
I think that was one of the things I forget. If they showed in those two scenes, I have to go back and look. But
because
if he was,
because he would have been whole again.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened to Anakin when he transferred over.
Yep. Well, which is weird because.
Because then in the remake they made him young again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Young this isn't some residual self-image shit either. It's like they really did go back and change his ass, which is fucked up. because I kind of like bloated ass, worn out Vader
Yeah.
or Anakin, who looked like he might have actually had the voice that like we heard come through that mask, even though we all know it was James Earl Jones.
Well, and here's the thing. I didn't realize one of the reasons that they didn't give him the voice wasn't also to it doesn't necessarily have to do with not casting any black people in the film in the first place. They were keeping the original voice actor separate from the source material, so he didn't find out about anything that was in the script that he could release, because he didn't know that nobody was supposed to know that Luke was the father.
Oh wow.
Or Darth was the father. So when he did that scene, he actually said something else, and he had no idea that Darth was saying, "I'm your father." And this is where them having the guy do a different voice wasn't just for that. There was another reason for it to do the voiceover.
Man, what did he say? I bet he said something like, "I killed your sister."
Oh yeah, I bet he probably did say something shit like that, and then
or something about Obi-Wan or something, or I killed your aunt and uncle.
Because the only reason I know is that they found an interview with the guy where he's saying the stories about it's like a real father-son dilemma, but he doesn't say overtly that Darth is the father. So he did an interview before the movie came out and effectively had spoiled it, but hadn't spoiled it. And people just found this recently, so it's interesting how it's weird how right now I think we are in the most fact-checking time in all history, and we're finding shit that people didn't realize happened. There's Easter eggs in video games that are just now being found that were there for 20 or 30 years and shit like that, where I'm saying
Ready Player One for inspiring a new generation of gamers to go and look for Easter eggs.
Right, yeah,
that like
exactly.
none of us could find because we didn't realize that they were there.
Yeah.
I hope you find it, and when you do, you share that shit with the rest of us, because we've been playing that shit for a long fucking time, and if you find something we haven't seen, fucking high five.
Yeah, man. It's interesting. I think it's a crazy time for information, just because people are sick, I think in general, sick of being tricked. So people are a lot more predisposed in general to not necessarily believe information when it's first presented to them, and then further, if something sounds too good to be true, they may fact check it, at least to their level of research capacity. So that's, everybody doesn't understand how to find peer-reviewed articles, but you don't necessarily have to prove something wrong.
No. I think that we also need to have a measure of flexibility with communication, because not everyone has as granular or a discrete understanding of language as the next person, and they might interpret things a little differently. There should be some flexibility with communication, or we should allow for people to, describe things a little differently. It's like because the three blind men with the elephant, that's like...
I think this is the difference between how black culture and white culture approach language, and this is one of the things I've learned going back and forth. So white people tend to be much more rigid about definitions and grammar, whereas black people are a lot more fluid, and it's more about the context and the greater idea than individual words or grammatical. If somebody makes a grammatical mistake, you're not gonna correct them if you understand what they meant, because the point is to understand what they meant. And this is
the goal is to communicate. Is it successful?
It's function over form versus form over function, and these are two completely. It makes sense to me when I see the whys as to...
Well, it's because Western culture wants to argue about how to deliver the answer more than they care about whether or not the answer exists or not.
Exactly. Or if the answer is accurate.
Or if the answer even makes sense.
Yep. and who's louder is more important.
But do you agree that you answered the question originally in its original form? This is a yes or no question.
But you said.
Well, sir, on the 24th, you said blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
And the question is intentionally phrased to be obtuse to try to trip people up.
Yeah.
Because this gets back to terms of service. And
That's not even like good social engineering.
No.
That's like the brute force social engineering.
Oh, this is one of the more recent. What's it called? League of Legends of Tomorrow episodes. The terms of service episode. Effectively, a bunch of people download an app and sign terms of service that sign their soul over to the devil. And this is one of those things where it's actually more believable than anything else that's happened on the show. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of things where I'm like, what's possible in 2019? This is actually possible. And that's kind of where when they did that episode, I'm like, okay, you guys lost me, then you reeled me back in with this one, because that's actually some very high level social commentary that's really funny. And the way they executed it is it's actually really good, because again what they're setting up in this season, I think, is, it's not unimportant or innocuous, but clearly it's gone off the rails. They're doing some different shit, but this is where, again, when they did this episode, it's called Terms of Service, and it's all about social engineering.
Yeah.
In fact, now that I think about the way the episode has gone down, I'm actually, good job, guys, because now that I think about it, they're showing people how social engineering works in a way that's in situ. So you see social engineering play out from a person who you don't want to social engineer people, and then when they're doing it, you see how this shit is happening in our world.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a subtle slap. So people will, like, think about it maybe 2 weeks later and be, oh shit, I shouldn't do download stuff without reading the terms of service.
My dad refers to mobile devices as a fondle slab, because he wanders, when he's outside, he sees people wandering around looking at their hands like fondling a slab of glass and plastic, and it just amuses him. And it's kind of amusing to think of like that. But I feel like, hasn't South Park made fun of this culture yet? The
Probably. I mean,
I haven't watched South.
I haven't watched South Park in over a decade.
I feel like they do their thing. They've got their audience.
Yeah.
Hats off to them for being able to do a fucking musical.
No, I take that back. I did watch the South Park. They did it. There was a marathon, and it was on in a hotel.
You just
I just watched a couple episodes, and it was about an alien. This is what it was. An alien had robbed another planet of space money, and then
he came to Earth.
And the Earth people were trying to hide him from the space police.
Because they wanted the space money.
And then they killed the alien and fucking kept the space money. And then the space police came back and were like, we see Mexico has built 35 hospitals and 6 theme parks overnight, or in the last 2 weeks. You guys sure you didn't find any space money? So that's where I checking back in with South Park. Shit's still fucking hilarious. It's still hilarious social commentary in a way that's done where I remember why it's still on and never, like, they never drop the ball. South Park is always on it week to week.
That means there's probably, with a high degree of certainty, an episode where they make fun of mobile device culture.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, there's got to be.
Oh, no, I know. I got to go check it out. I need to find this episode.
Because they make fun of so many things in the Space Money episode where I'm like, man, they break down the banks, they break down our concept of money, they break down the concept of fairness and people's quick predisposition to steal when presented with the opportunity. It's like, man, South Park has been on pretty much they've been humanity's mirror with comedy for a very long time, which is why I think when you're woke, quote unquote, you can't watch it for too long, or else it becomes not funny.
Yeah.
Because it's too on point.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, we had to step away from it as individuals, in the sense of, you can only go down that rabbit hole for so long without becoming depressed, thinking about the world's nature. Because part of the problem is then you get focused. It's a negative loop. It's an infinite negative loop, and it's you got to pull yourself out of that with the positive loops, just because it's pretty even. There's no reason to actually say that it's more negative than positive, because shit's actually pretty even.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to focus on how bad the negative is, because then you don't want to turn around and focus on how positive the goods are, because then it feels crass.
On that note, Grumpy Cat tartar sauce checked out recently, and the internet cried pretty hard for a couple of hours, it seemed.
But that cat lived a lot longer than it should have.
Yeah, and in its wake, all sorts of shit that normally would have been pretty depressing wasn't nearly as depressing as tartar sauce checking out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a weird, bonus, I guess.
Well, it's like a weird.
It shifts the bar of depressing material.
This is this is why news is social engineering.
Yep.
Because it puts things next to each other that shouldn't be weighed against each other. You shouldn't feel more bad about a fucking 7-year-old cat with a degenerative disease dying more than the fucking kids in Yemen. But because of the way the news is presented, you do.
Well, because
the world cries more for fucking Grumpy Cat than kids in Yemen, because of the way they're social engineered.
Yeah.
It's not even their fault. You can't even blame people.
I don't think people
I can't blame people. I can't get mad at people.
Well, they don't see pictures of kids in Yemen getting.
But that's because, again, it's the way that they're engineered. They've got thousands of pictures of Grumpy Cat and 0 pictures of kids in Yemen, because it's been determined by the media that it's not good for advertising to show kids in Yemen. It's good to talk about it ever so often. It's good to mention it if you're soliciting charity, and then intersperse commercials between it, which it's so crazy that people can have stories about hurricanes, or we can have stories about all the shit that's happening in Alabama, and then pause and then sell time to advertisers who are then going to come in and then exploit that fight or flight that was just activated in that person, to then pitch them some product, which is probably a pharmaceutical, that's going to tell them, hey, if you got this problem, this pill, or this injection, or this fucking intervaginal mesh, or whatever. Yeah, there's commercials for intervaginal meshes, bro. You see this shit on daytime TV where you're like, what the fuck am I seeing a commercial for an intervaginal mesh
They
for?
make synthetic foreskins for guys who have been
There's probably a commercial for it.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And it probably airs at 11 a.m. after fucking between Price is Right and fucking Days of Our Lives. I don't know if those two things come on between each other. I don't watch soap operas.
You know what? I bet the commercial for intervaginal mesh or for synthetic foreskins happens between or on sports channels, because
which audience has been most affected by the loss of foreskin? Those that watch fucking other people fucking do sports activities most of the time, and then consume the most amount of interracial porn. That's the demographic. Because then it's like, man, you find out that the red states are the ones that consume the most interracial porn. Go figure.
Well, when there are entire categories for Asian women or black women.
Yeah.
But then for all of white women, it's by hair color.
Right. That's amazing. Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's insane. Man. Because then you also realize Russian women don't count as white women.
Yeah, because Russian women have their own category too.
Yeah. Yeah. This is hilarious, high level. And it's funny.
Well, what sucks is that all of Europe gets lumped into Euro.
Oh, man. That is hilarious. Well, I recently read articles that were discussing and dissecting the roles of Grand Theft Auto in expressing masculinity for generations. Because then Grand Theft Auto 4, the same writer did the articles. Grand Theft Auto 4 has a much different level than Grand Theft Auto 5, and I think what ended up happening was we were talking about it, or I was one of the people who was consulted in the paper as like a Grand Theft Auto specialist, because I probably put how many hundreds of hours in that game at that point, into the series, not just the game. But one of the things that we discussed is the hyper masculinization is mocking toxic masculinity, and the reason it's mocking it is because it's not funny if it's not mocking it.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things you have to realize, and this is in discussing the paper originally, I don't think she had seen it from that perspective, but then bringing in guys like myself who played it but also were clearly not hyper masculine.
Well, there's like a
that toxic
level of ultra violence and like
right,
or hyper overkill, where it's like okay, we get it. You sent some mercenaries and a mugger and an airstrike, and you had bombs like all up and down the walkway that they were gonna go into. We get it. You set this huge thing up to kill one person. I mean, that's cool that somebody's organized like that and can call in all that shit, but I don't know. That's the version of the game that I never really got into because it didn't make any sense to me. I thought the point was to be put in touch with other criminals so you could go on heists and do, engage in criminal activity on the internet.
yeah,
Like that's a criminal activity simulator, right? That's what it's always been.
basically.
And that part of it was always really fun to me because it's like...
Because then you can act out things that are not allowed in real life.
Exactly.
So it becomes this element of you get to experience the ultra-violence through the viddy without actually viddying the ultra-violence in real life.
My favorite, like, they're not really videos, they're like articles about it. Like, this is like walkthrough, this is how you do the heist. My favorite variation on that theme is when one person, obviously the person who's coordinating it all, because they're like the one getting screen captures, but they're like composing the images properly. And you look at this stuff and it's like, that's a well composed image. They're focusing on the right things because the camera in the game is actually, you can actually use it.
Right.
And that's kind of cool. And I know that they're like, there was an emergence of like Grand Theft Auto photography, but now I think that they're applying those principles to the walkthroughs. So now you get these really cinematic looking walkthroughs instead of just like person standing there and a bunch of dead people. It's kind of cool. It's impressive.
Final Fantasy 15. One of the characters in the party.
But these are generated by players. That's what I'm getting at.
But I'm saying, in Final Fantasy 15, one of the players in the NPCs in your party would take pictures.
No shit.
And then at the end of the missions, you would get to pick from your photos which ones you'd want to save. And even further, they would like the characters in your party would come together for photos that you wouldn't see
Huh.
in the mission. So they say you went to this hotel, there would be images that they took where everybody gathered in the lobby and were, you know, arm in arm, but it didn't happen when you were playing. But these would be things that the person who's taking the pictures, because then based on what you chose, the characters would change the style of the photography they're taking. So if you wanted more emotional shit, they would start taking more emotional pictures, even down to if you're like taking pictures of animals and pictures of dogs, that's what they'll start taking pictures of. It's not that they'll stop taking action pictures, but they'll start doing what you guide them to do. So it becomes this element of they built in a photographer that starts to take on what your taste preference is.
It has some kind of machine learning code.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's cool.
But it's so amazing that they're taking these things in concerning how we approach culture in real life and building them into the fictional realms, because these are, you know, it's in the Final Fantasy world that they're doing that. There's still monsters and fucking kings and shit, but they're also taking selfies.
Yeah, giant monsters that summon energy from like dark dimensions and rain hellfire from like portals to those dark dimensions.
Yeah,
which is so cool.
I think it's really cool to have that intersection of fantasy and modern technology, because you're driving a car a lot of times and you have to stop and get gas, but it's on the way to fight a fucking monster or some shit. And then you got this dude who's sitting next to you taking selfies while you're driving to your destination.
And they're on some motorcycle that has gigantic wheels and a sword sticking off it.
Yeah, some shit. Yeah.
It's a motorcycle that's as long as your car.
The cars, there's you can have like a monster truck in there, and then I think there's I don't know if it's a limo, but it's kind of like a luxury car, like a Phantom, or some shit like that. But yeah, it was a good game. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you're talking about the online influence of Grand Theft Auto. That game has shaped a lot of other games in a way that I think The Matrix shaped other films.
Mm-hmm.
And when Grand Theft Auto 3 originally came out, it was visually different than the previous series altogether. And the principles were kind of the same, but as far as the way the play goes, it started to set apart open world gaming without ethics in a way that Fable redefined open world gaming with ethics, because then you get Fallout, where your actions definitely get carried throughout the rest of the world, and your reputation gets carried throughout the rest of the world in a way that I think it's interesting to have ethics start to play into video games and have ethics engines, and I think that's really cool.
Well, I always thought it was interesting how like you could I only got to play Fable a couple times and not for very long, but the people that I knew who did play it, they had to try really hard to turn out different characters.
Because you always want to make the same ethical decisions.
Because people will almost always make the same types of ethical decisions.
Yep. It's really hard to do the bad thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Or if you're already in tune with that and you're making the wrong decisions because you're being really like, I'm just going to be like the worst thing possible. Somehow the machine knows that, and then it delivers like the same outcome.
This is where Witcher is really good at creating nuanced situations, so it's not as easy to make a choice. This is why the Witcher series is so fucking awesome.
Man, every time I see Witcher, it's like I'm just impressed by people's video cards when I see it, because every time...
Dude, it's such an awesome series. I mean, I guess it's obviously based off of a novel, or a novel series, but the fucking game. This is getting back to adaptations. So this is where I feel like Game of Thrones as an adaptation would have probably made a better uh, open world game than a TV series for people who wanted it to be more accurate to the book. But a TV series is better for those who don't want to be active in carrying the plot. Because what you realize is when you're reading a book, the reader has to be active in creating the visuals. So it's half active media, where film is almost 100% passive.
God, I feel bad for kids who don't read fiction
Yeah, I do too.
because that
At least comic books. At least comic books.
yeah.
Comic books put the visuals there for you, but you have to fill in the action. So that's at least something. You
Yeah.
fill in the motion and the sound in your head with comic books. So that's at least some level of creating.
I mean, it's an advanced graphic content picture book at that point.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, I agree that's a good place to start, but I feel I'm afraid
It's like training wheels for
Yeah.
for literature.
because eventually,
for
like with a
novels.
novel, you can get in like 10 pages one frame of a comic book. It might take 20 pages to fill in all that information. By the time it all comes together in your mind and you realize what happened and what you just read, you can't. That's one of those kind of very cerebral effects that literature has that film doesn't really deliver.
Right.
They try to give you a bunch of clues.
It's not possible.
But it's just not possible.
Just not possible.
And
Well, because you can't do internal monologues the same way you can in literature.
Yeah.
That it's just not. You're just not able to move along a story revealing the same things in the same ways in film, which makes it why you should do the endings in a different way.
Yeah.
You have to set up the foreshadowing in a different way.
It's why the stories have to be adapted with understanding that there are limitations of the medium.
Yeah.
You know, those things shouldn't be limitations on the story. It should actually, those are opportunities to make a story more interesting.
So, I think this is a good place to discuss in-game in the sense of I watched it recently with, I think probably for the 5th time.
I watched it recently too.
With my lady who was watching it for the first time. And I was interested to hear her critiques of it because once I heard her critiques, I was like, oh, this is interesting to see the film through the lens of someone who's never read any of the source material, because now I see what the problem is with the way they presented it. It's that the foreshadowing in the film, about 40% of it only makes sense if you read the source material, even though they're going to change the way that they execute it on screen. So, for example, the best example that I can use is the Hail Hydra moment.
Yeah.
So, what did that mean to you? Like, in the context of what we were seeing, what did Hail Hydra mean to you?
That was a very well executed plan.
Like, in the sense of what source material?
Well, that was a reference to when the captain had been co-opted by Hydra.
So
that was like a complete storyline, though. That had nothing to do with the Infinity War.
So in the context of what happens at the end of the film, what did you jump to the conclusion?
Oh, I was thinking about a slew of things. Had nothing to do with that, though. I wasn't thinking about Hydra or Skrulls or Secret Wars or anything. I didn't need at that point I had almost completely forgot.
It didn't draw you. I
didn't even think about it.
Whether
really.
you thought about it or not, it didn't draw you out of the film.
Yeah.
It drew her out of the film because she had no previous context for him to make that comment. In the sense of, because she also didn't binge watch the other films, there's so much foreshadowing in the films, whether it's the elevator context.
Well, you have to have paid attention to not Civil War. Yeah, was it Civil War or is it the Winter Soldier?
Yeah, I think
Winter
it's
Soldier.
Winter Soldier.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to Winter Soldier for that one moment when he gets in the fight in the elevator.
Right.
You have to watch that right after Avengers.
And then
You can't watch.
And
You have
then
to go and watch everything in the correct sequence, otherwise it doesn't make sense.
And then for Steve Rogers to have done that, knowing that he has to go give them back the fucking staff. He has to go give them back the staff after having done that.
And get in a fight with them.
No, I don't. I mean, but he doesn't do that in this timeline now.
Oh, that's right.
So that's what I'm saying. So us as comic book nerds can parse through this and figure out. It's not that she as a non-comic book nerd can't figure it out. It's that it's an inside joke to us, and she kind of has to do a lot more work to get to the same conclusions that we can come to.
Yeah.
And there's an intersection of readers and viewers that get everything that most people as general viewers won't get.
Yeah.
And then they will feel left out of those things in a way that ostracizes them and pulls them out of the suspension of disbelief. And also, it was too predictable to her, as in the sense that because of the pacing that they did it for breaking it up into 2 films.
They could have made Endgame into like a 2-part.
Yeah.
And given all of that story like the justice that it deserved.
And then it wouldn't have been
it wouldn't have been rushed.
Or if they had put Infinity War and Endgame into the same film, they wouldn't have had to do the same thing over twice. Because they just did the same thing twice.
Yeah.
It's like I feel bad for anybody who's paid a ton to see the movie multiple times. Because I pirate the fuck out of that shit, of course. I'm not watching it 5 times and paying for that shit. Just because it wasn't... especially after thinking about it for a while, the end scene...
It's the second highest grossing movie of all time, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, probably on track to be the first.
I don't even think it matters if people pirated it.
No, of course not. So that's why I pirated it. That's exactly why I pirated it.
That's like why it's so...
Because they don't need my fucking money.
Matter.
They don't need my fucking money.
It doesn't even matter at all. Like they're gonna get the money anyway.
And I don't need to see it on a 70-foot, 80-foot screen. I really don't. It's not that big a deal. In the sense of, there's more, that's why I'm like, I can pirate this shit and not...
I'm actually more interested in seeing the new Terminator on a giant screen than I am any of the Avengers movies.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's like...
My dilemma, of course, is that, we're being shown the next generation of Disney prince and princesses.
Okay, well, here's what I'm saying, in the sense of, once you get past, I think, a 32-inch screen, people's heads get bigger than normal size anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So it all becomes larger than life. So once you're on a 16-inch screen, there's not a huge difference in the experience between the 16-inch and the 80-foot.
Yeah. Well, that's
in the terms of...
It's all about viewing distance and maximizing your viewing angle.
And it's like, in the sense of the head being 40 feet tall versus 6 feet tall, the 6-foot tall head is still, or I guess it would be 4.5 feet tall. It's still a daunting single head.
So on my 42-inch display, my 42-inch 4K computer monitor, when I'm sitting at a computing distance, arm and finger lengths away from the leading edge of the display, people's heads are larger than life.
Yeah. And
I've got surround sound so that I get that full movie experience. And the only thing that I'm really missing out on is the initial release. I can't watch a movie in full resolution, like the day it comes out, because it's just not available yet. And I'm cool with waiting. I can wait I'm a patient person.
Yeah.
Like, it's all gonna get out someday.
Yeah.
They can't like, they're not gonna like make a movie and then not release it.
Yeah.
Even if it.
I mean, but the Avengers that's out now is about 480p.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not terrible because part of it is, yeah, a 1080p would be great, but 480p for sitting at home at my own pace, able to pause it when I want to, able to fucking cook my own meals and not have to pay $20 for fucking
Hot dog.
hot dog, and feel bad about it while I'm sitting there trying to enjoy a film. Yeah, that shit's fucking totally worth it. But this gets back to, also, I think when people are watching it and they've paid for it and they paid for the experience, they're not necessarily able to watch the film as analytically.
Well, that's part of that's because you're getting the whole experience of a big screen and the big sound system, and not everyone has. I mean, a real like a THX certified movie theater has a incredibly huge and sophisticated sound system with like, upwards of a dozen channels of audio. And that's not a joke system. That's like, amplifiers galore, subwoofers galore, surround systems that are full range and, time delayed because they're engineered for the theater presentation itself.
And in that, they're getting so overwhelmed with information. I think it's actually impossible to take in everything because you're so overstimulated visually and auditorily.
Yeah.
So then this is where some of the complaints that people originally had weren't accurate as far as loopholes in the plot and things like that. So this is kind of where, after having watched it 5 times, so this is one of the best things I noticed when the first scene happened. I didn't even notice this upon any of the viewings by myself, but when the first thing my lady said, and she's like, look at Thor guilt eating in the background.
Yeah.
Before he got fat, he was sitting in the background guilt eating while other people were talking. I didn't even notice that shit because I was looking at the foreground.
Yeah.
But then she's like, and then she said specifically guilt eating in a way that he wasn't showing guilt and he hadn't shown the PTSD yet. So Chris Hemsworth, fucking hats off to him for getting that guilt-eating emotion spot on in a way that it was called out.
Man.
Like, she called that shit. Because if we would have been in the theater, she wouldn't have been able to call it out.
Yeah.
But we're sitting in our room, or in the living room.
You can see the whole screen.
Yeah, and then, but she would have been, like, not... She wouldn't have wanted to offend people sitting next to her who
say that.
Yeah, and talk and be loud. But if we're sitting at home, it's like, yeah, we can say whatever the fuck we want and not have people shush us. But when she said that shit, I was like, oh my God, they totally implanted that. And then when the people who didn't pick up on the PTSD aspect of why Thor got big, it was there the whole time. He's like guilt eating. He's fucking crying like randomly.
He's got a Thor-sized guilt appetite.
Yeah, he won't allow people to say Thanos' name.
He drinks kegs of beer at a time.
Yeah, so that whole... My thing is, the fact that most America laughed at him the way they mocked him in the film and then didn't understand that he had PTSD and he was, like, destroying himself through food because of the guilt. That's why fucking Americans are... like ignoring it when other people do it. They don't even see it in a fucking character doing it on screen. So that's why when she saw that shit, I was like, oh my God, well done, Hemsworth.
Well, yeah, they killed Heimdall and his brother, like in front of him. He was powerless. And even when he did kill Thanos the first time, it didn't matter because he still snapped. And then he killed Thanos the second time, and it still didn't matter because the stones were gone. And
then he had to go back to get a stone, knowing that it's the day his mom dies.
Yeah.
And he can't do anything about it again. Again.
That shit's so fucking painful.
And that's where this is kind of where I think, in the sense of, I don't know if it's the Disneyfication or
totally
the
Disney.
fact that the American audience can't handle it, and that's why Disney did it, is that they kind of made it covert, but it's there. And again, it's like, I saw the PTSD story angle from the beginning, but to see the guilt eating planted at the very beginning, seen in the background, and then
There's beer on the ship.
yeah. I mean, the beer is like very overt, but
We've got snacks too.
yeah, I mean,
Rocket's so terrible. He just nails the whole time. Rocket's a great character.
well, but that's also how they snap him out of it. It's like they know that the only way to get him out of this PTSD shit is either with alcohol or with fucking food, and that's a real message that they couldn't resolve with a real resolution because Americans are too sensitive about it, because they're doing the same shit.
Body image in American society is just a fucked up, flawed construct right now. I think if we were presented the pop stars of today when we were teenagers, our parents would have freaked out.
Oh yeah.
They wouldn't have just freaked out. They would have like the music industry would have collapsed.
I mean, my parents freaked out when I got grounded for listening to The Chronic for an entire summer. I mean, seriously.
No, that's
like a whole summer. I was grounded when my parents fucking heard what was on that shit. When they finally listened to the Walkman that I had been walking around listening to, because I think I played it in the car too close, and I didn't realize they could hear it. And they were like, "What's that saying?" And I was like, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
And then they took the headphones.
Man,
and it was over.
I didn't even get that
shit was
far.
over.
My dad, I was at my grandma's house, my uncle and my grandma's house in Sacramento, and I was watching MTV before on our way. No, we were moving to Indiana, so we were leaving California, and I'm like, I didn't have MTV as a kid, so whenever someone's house had it, I was always like, ooh, MTV. So I turn it on, and right as I turn it on, fucking Sir Mix-a-Lot comes out, and it's like, I like big butts. You know, my dad's like in the kitchen, he just walks right into the living room and turns off the TV. He's like, I'm not having that. And I knew pretty much.
I mean, but you could control shit back then, in a way, because you reminded me, I wasn't the only one that got grounded. Because then my parents were like, "Where'd you get this?" Oh. And I didn't want to tell them at first. And then, of course, I had to end up telling them
You can't.
where I got it. And both of my friends got grounded. Because one had made us both the tapes. And then my one friend got grounded for making us the tapes. And then the other friend got grounded for having it as well.
Oh man.
And it's like, man, we used to get grounded for shit other people said. In the sense of, because there was so much more control over access to information and media, you could find out where your kids got that shit from. Now it's everywhere to the point where
now you just go into your iTunes store history,
right,
or your Google Music history, or your YouTube history,
and just click, yes, I'm over 18. Yeah, that proves it.
Computer, we need you to be Star Trek level age verification, not 20th century age verification.
I feel like 21st century age verification should be social questions.
Yeah.
Like, if you have $7 in your bank account, and then you have a $10 meal that you want, what do you do? That should be how you prove you're over 18.
Yeah.
If somebody was over 18, you would figure that shit out. Like, oh, okay, I donate plasma.
Yeah.
Or fucking overdraft my account and then go pay the overdraft fee or whatever. Like,
I can't do anything.
Some 18-year-old be like, what? This is impossible.
They'd be paralyzed.
Right.
Well, no, there's some crafty 18-year-olds out there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But then they deserve that shit.
Yeah.
Like, if you're an 18-year-old that can figure out the social question that most people have to be over 18. Fucking let them look at the porn.
So
Fuck it.
That's actually.
Fuck it.
I'm glad you said that. My one of my uncles, for the longest time, was still going to sites that put shit on his computer and fucked up his computer.
Yeah.
And I tell everyone that like says anything to me about it, is like, there are websites that you can just stream from that don't require you to install anything. You don't have to sign up for anything. These things are out there. They don't destroy your computer. It's like you don't have to worry about infecting your computer.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to disable your firewall. You can just go to it. It's like YouTube, right? And in my mind, it's like I found this stuff before I was able to buy booze. So if I was able to find that stuff before I could buy liquor, and it takes an adult, granted, there's varying levels of computer literacy and exposure and all these things, and I understand that that's a factor in this, but like in a lot of regards, like I've been on the internet since I was in single digits, and so to me there are things that are obvious.
But then you're talking to somebody who doesn't know what a Boolean search means.
Exactly. And so
at all.
and so there's obviously there's physical age, and that's like measured in some kind of chronological term, but then how do we measure exposure to ideas, concepts, information, or time spent actually like trying to consume this information and making something meaningful out of that consumption of information? Because not everyone reads or comprehends at the same levels, and this affects how everything comes together, and it's complicated.
And then not only that, some people are determined to feel as if they don't need to ever learn to read on those levels and still have their opinion be valid with those that have gone to the highest levels of learning and application. Because it's not that people shouldn't have opinions.
There's sometimes when I read white papers and it's like, holy shit, I need to read like 4 other fucking white papers and this dissertation before this actually makes sense. And then I start reading and reading and reading. Then I get to the dissertation, it's like 100 pages, 200 pages. It's like, God, I'm not getting paid to do this. I can't fucking. Holy shit.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, like,
I'm not getting credit for a class. I'd read it if it was for like credit for a class, but. There's only so much to.
That's why I'm getting a doctorate.
Yeah, you go back to school. That's all it means.
Because then it's I'm getting credit for doing research on cybersecurity and doing the shit I wouldn't wanted to do anyway. But that's why I'd rather get credit for it and get a degree for what I'm interested in the sense of, it's funny when people were telling me in 2014 that cybersecurity was a dumb thing to get into. People were seriously telling me that it was not a worthwhile endeavor.
I remember in undergrad one time you said something about you're finishing up undergrad and you were like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, if I'm going to go to a graduate program or if I'm going to do another bachelor's program. And I think I said something like, basically like, there's a lot of security in a graduate program. That's the path, I think. Once you get to that point where it's like that door is open, you go through it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Because
because everybody can't go through it, and that's part of it. Once you realize you can't just waltz in there. I mean, unless you're fucking rich, which you don't need to do it in the first place.
Yeah, so if you're rich, you just throw money at it until it works.
But then you don't need to do that. So that's why, in the sense of, as someone who's not coming from a rich family, who then, my thing is, it's difficult to say, oh, I had to work super hard to get there. In the sense of, it's not that I didn't work hard. It's that I enjoy learning, so what is hard work for other people is what I just want to do. I don't want to fucking watch some shit that's not going to be useful to me unless it's fucking DC Comics or Marvel Comics related, most likely, or
but that's like
written by Neil Gaiman.
But that excites a completely different part of your brain.
And it's activating creativity
your imagination
because it's useful literature. And that's why I go to it in times of down fucking trying to turn down my mental energy. That's why I rely on high level
Well, you can't
literature.
you can't read technical manuals and white papers all day long.
No, of course not.
That's
Of
like
course not.
mind numbing.
I mean, it's just
But
like I watched fucking the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie last night after I don't know how many hours of reading shit during the day. And then it's just sometimes you got to go from reading low frequency words and high level theory to some dude just yelling for an hour.
yeah.
Just fucking primal yelling, and it's like, okay, that's a good cathartic.
So if you're ever like not wanting to listen to Goku or the Dragon Ball group yell for an hour, in the early 2000s there was a reboot of He-Man, the Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, that reboot actually has incredible sound, and you know, turn that up, and it's one of those things like I don't think that at the time I wouldn't have been aware had I not like had a giant subwoofer in the room, and during like one really critical episode where they're exploring the origins of Skeletor, and like, you know, it's pretty intense shit.
Yeah.
You can't introduce the origin of Skeletor without a really intense battle.
Yeah.
And so there was some earth shaking going on, and
Yeah.
you know, that stuff's like He-Man, man. That show is that story. I mean, I realized that it was kind of, you know, its origins are kind of dubious in terms of, you know, let's sell some toys, but it actually ended up creating a pretty good story universe.
Well, the comic books were pretty, I guess, in the sense of they got to have a wide set of source material.
Yeah.
Because the comic books started off pretty early too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think there's probably time where they could actually do a He-Man live action film and actually pull it off.
Well,
I mean, Dolph Lundgren wasn't bad. Fucking Skeletor was bad.
Yeah. Well, have you seen the? It's like He-Man and Skeletor appear at some dive bar on the edge of some town, and then they engage in some dance-off to Time of My Life. It's hilarious. I highly recommend it.
That's awesome. Fucking The Rock could easily play He-Man.